I'm not here to rap or sing or ask you for money, although you should donate a little to Temple Shalom anyway. When Rabbi Cantor Shira and I first started discussing doing a Pride Shabbat, it felt a little self-serving, like I was helping to plan a Dan Shabbat, which, if anyone would like to know what that would look like, we're gonna serve pancakes and play board games. We should do that. But Shira assured me that Pride's message of inclusivity, community, and love reaches well beyond those of us in the LGBTQ ... community. By the way, instead of repeatedly using all those letters, I'll just be using the word queer, as in, isn't it queer that he keeps using all those letters? As we were talking about what a Pride Shabbat might look like, I remembered a moment from 2017 when I gave my first Kol Nidre speech here at the Temple. In it, I started by introducing myself and talked a bit about my husband Eric being Protestant and my being Jewish, or as we call it, two-faced. And after that service, I was stopped by a congregant who thanked me for speaking so casually about my family and that it meant a lot to their family. And I learned later that their family included a middle school-aged child who, sooner rather than later, would probably be sitting down with their family for a rather serious talk. So it seems that as a visible member of a minority class, I have a certain representational responsibility. So, I know, right? So, I was thinking, if I could go back in time and have a direct talk with that middle school student, who we'll call Virginia Woolf, what would I say? So, first I'd want to talk history. Virginia. Can I call you Ginny? No? Okay. People in the queer community were not all miserable before Stonewall, and we'll get to that in a minute. People had to be more careful, but were able to be in loving, long-term same-sex relationships throughout history. In fact, 2 male servants of Egyptian king Unas were found in his tomb intertwined and nose to nose, which is usually a position reserved for married people. They lived 4,400 years ago, or as your parents call it, the last time they played decent music on the radio. Now here in America, Virginia Woolf, while queer people were able to live happily, if quietly, homosexuality was still viewed as a mental illness. If outed, people could lose their jobs, their families, or worse. Throughout the 20th century, Provincetown in Cape Cod and the Fire Island communities of Cherry Grove and the Pines were popular oases for the lesbian and gay community. In New York City in the 50s and 60s, it was illegal to serve queer people in a licensed bar. So most bars catering to the queer community were owned by the mob. It's true. One of these was the Stonewall Tavern on Christopher Street in Greenwich Village. Police raids on bars like Stonewall were common. The patrons would be arrested and their names printed in the next day's newspaper. Newspaper. It's a blog made out of trees. Early in the morning of June 28, 1969, the NYPD raided the Stonewall Inn as they had done before. But why was this night different from all other nights? Well, the patrol wagons that were used to take those arrested to the station for processing and humiliation were delayed. It was hot. A crowd gathered. The crowd got angry. A lesbian named Stormy DeLarvery was being beaten and thrown into a waiting car when she shouted to the crowd, "Why don't you guys do something?" And they did. There is some discrepancy as to whether the first rock or bottle was thrown by this trans woman or that drag queen, but they all had a hand in the liberation of our people. A riot ensued and actually continued for the next 2 nights. Now, things didn't change right away, but it was clear that a dynamic had shifted. Queer people felt an empowerment that wasn't there before Stonewall. Organizations like the Gay Liberation Front and Gay Activists Alliance were formed to mobilize queer people into constructive action. Gay power demonstrations were held across the country and around the world, and in June of 1970, Christopher Street Liberation Day was held with a rally in front of where the stone wall had been. It shut down about a month after the riots. There were also marches in Los Angeles and Chicago, and these are generally considered the first gay pride marches. And the Stonewall riots are why pride events are generally held in June. It would be a few years before we started seeing floats from Wells Fargo and Mountain Dew. Now, over the next 50 years, progress came in fits and starts. In December 1973, the American Psychiatric Association voted unanimously to remove homosexuality from their list of mental illnesses. In 1974, a 21-year-old Kathy Kozachenko was elected to the Ann Arbor City Council, making her the first openly lesbian or gay candidate to be elected to public office in the United States. In 1977, Anita Bryant, orange juice spokesperson and professional pretty lady, headed the Save Our Children campaign, which successfully repealed Dade County, Florida's anti-discrimination ordinance based on sexual orientation. She then moved her campaign to California, where she attempted to get a law passed that would allow teachers to be fired for any mention of homosexuality in schools that was deemed to be positive. The measure failed, and she got hit in the face with a pie. Now, I don't condone such action because a pie is a terrible thing to waste. On July 3rd, 1981, the New York Times ran an article about a new gay cancer that seemed to be spreading. For many, this was the first they heard of a disease that soon became known as AIDS. While AIDS struck people of all walks of life, it was particularly devastating to gay and bisexual men. Because of this, the government was slow to respond to the pandemic. Lesbian women around the world stepped up as caregivers and activists in defense of their friends who were dying. Activist groups like ACT UP used civil disobedience to get noticed and demand fast-track drug research and affordable treatments. Names like Rock Hudson, Freddie Mercury, Anthony Perkins, Amanda Blake, Arthur Ashe, Robert Reed, and Eazy-E brought the disease home to fans around the world. Now, in the 1990s, TV shows like Will and Grace, Ellen, Roseanne, and My So-Called Life helped educate Americans on the diversity within the queer community. The 90s also brought us Walker, Texas Ranger, but we won't hold it against them. The 2003 Supreme Court decision in Lawrence v. Texas struck down sodomy laws around the country that had been used to persecute queer people. Individual states legalized same-sex marriage throughout the next decade, and in 2015, the Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell v. Hodges brought it to the country as a whole. Eric and I were married in 2011, 10 years ago. Shira sang 2 songs, Shehechianu and Can't Help Loving That Man of Mine. Now, when I was your age, Virginia Woolf, it never occurred to me that I would have been able to marry the man I love, to raise a child with him, to file a joint tax return with him. You know, happily ever after stuff. Don't wait, Virginia Woolf, to tell the people you love who you are. I waited way too long to come out to my family, and so did Eric. He made me say that. It's not that I thought they wouldn't be anything but supportive and accepting. It's just that I had waited so long to tell them out of fear or anxiety that I was embarrassed at having waited so long. So I waited longer. It was a solid plan. The people who love you want to love all of you. All you have to do is let them. And if people have a problem with who you are, and people will, remember, Virginia, your people are out there, including here at Temple Shalom. According to a study published in 2012, queer youth who experience high levels of rejection from their families during adolescence were more than 8 times more likely to have attempted suicide by the time they reached their early 20s. Suicide attempts in queer youth occur at a rate of as much as 3 times that of their heteronormative peers. Rates of depression, drug use, and HIV and STD infections were also significantly higher. And according to the Trevor Project, LGBTQ youth represent as much as 40% of the homeless youth population. When governments pass laws specifically targeting queer youth, we are telling our children that who they are is wrong, that their feelings are wrong, that for them, loving is wrong. You didn't fail as a parent if you have a queer child. If your child feels safe enough to tell you their truth, you nailed parenting. If you reject your child because of who they are or who they love, that sounds like failure to me. So many people sacrificed and fought and died so that I could stand up here tonight and talk to you and maybe make a small difference in someone's life. I hope that just by living honestly, I might be able to impact other lives, even if I wasn't at Stonewall. But maybe I was. Maybe we all were at Stonewall. Maybe we tell the story of Pride like we tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt every year at Passover, in the first person. Maybe I threw the first bottle at Stonewall. Maybe you marched at the Christopher Street Liberation Day Parade. You voted for a lesbian for the Ann Arbor City Council. You held the hand of a young man dying of a terrible disease. You threw a pie in Anita Bryant's face. Your lawsuit eventually led to every American having the right to marry the person they love. You came here tonight to celebrate inclusion, diversity, community, and love. And I thank you. Shabbat Shalom.